Good afternoon, everyone. We're going to get started in just a few minutes. I'm just going to go ahead and give everyone a couple more minutes to log on. Looks like about half the folks who are registered are here, so I'm going to give people just another couple of minutes, and we'll be right back. All right, we'll go ahead and get started, and people can trickle in, but looks like most folks are here. Just a few things before we get started. We will have a few polls, and so if you hear me say that we'd like you to vote or do a poll on something, just make sure you're, on the lookout. The second thing is after webinar, either sometime today or sometime before the end of the week, we'll send you a follow-up email with a few items. So, the slides and some resources and all of that, as well as we do record our webinars as well. And so, we'll make sure that you get access to that recording. Lastly, if you have any questions, feel free to put them in the little question box. Some I might be able to answer while we're going, others I might save till the end. But feel free to drop them in there at any point. If you wouldn't mind just letting me know right now in the question box that someone could just type in that you can, hear me and see the screen share and everything. And it says we're all set, and then we'll go ahead and get started. Okay, great. Some people already put some in there real quick. Awesome. So, a bit about me. So my name is Jack Kavanaugh. Some of you know me if you've been on our webinars before, or if you just worked with us before. I'm the Director of Training and Program Development for Mentor New York. So Mentor New York is the New York State affiliate of Mentor, the National Mentoring Partnership. At Mentor Mentor New York, we work with and support mentoring programs all across the state. My background is in social work and youth programs. I've spent the bulk of the last 15 years, pretty much every job I've ever had, working with youth programs. I am based in Buffalo, but we also do have our office in New York City as well as Long Island. So we're gonna start with a quick poll. I think there's 4 on this one. I don't usually do that many, but thought we'd amp up the polls a little bit today. So here's the first one. So I'll give you a minute to vote. Just another couple seconds. Looks like most people have. If you haven't yet voted and you want to do that quick, that'd be great. Awesome. Looks like most everyone. So let's share, see the results. So it looks like about half of you currently manage a youth mentoring program, about 18% said no experience, and about 30% in the process of developing a youth mentoring program. Awesome. So let's talk about what we're going to talk about today. So in today's webinar, we're going to talk about and look at why screening volunteer mentors is important. So we're going to look at, so there's the why. We're going to look at all the tools needed to vet mentors fairly and really determine a candidate's fitness for mentoring. We'll discuss the significance of candidates' childhood experiences and their interaction with young people and why that's important to try to work and get a handle on. How to explore volunteers' preconceived ideas about mentoring. Why do we use references and what do we want to learn from them? Background checks and the importance of background checks, and some additional tools that can be useful. At the very end, we'll have time for questions, like I said. So if you have questions while we're going and you want to throw them in that box, then that's awesome. If you want to save them until the end, that's great too. Either way, we'll definitely get to them. So let's do another quick poll. And this is more about your specific experience screening mentors. Let's see where everyone's at. So give people a minute or so to vote. All right, let's see. So most folks have some prior experience but think they can improve, and some people with no experience and some understanding. That's a good mix. You're all in the right place, so that's great. So one of my notes. So let's talk about why it's important. So one reason that you want to screen potential mentors, this is one of those PowerPoints that has all the bullet points that come out individually. I'm just going to put them all at once. There we go. So I can just talk about them. So one reason you want to screen potential mentors is to examine their personality and characteristics and see if they're in sync with being a good role model for youth. So when you're sitting down with them, you want to see how are they responding to questions? Do you think this is someone that you want to put in front of young people? Just based on their personality, their history, their hobbies, their work and personal experiences, just getting a really basic overview of, is this someone that you want as part of your program? You also want to, as managers of youth development programs and mentoring programs, we have a responsibility and liability to make certain that the young people in our care are going to be safe. The only way that we can honestly vouch for any individual's intentions is through thoughtful scrutiny. Parents and guardians depend on us to know as much as possible about the volunteers we assign to their children, and their right to do that. They're putting a lot of trust and care into us in terms of who are the adults that we are putting in these young people's lives. And so we want to, if you think about yourself and if you have a child at home or a niece and nephew or any kind of young person that you were close with, that you were referring to a mentoring program, what type of screening would you want that program to be putting their volunteers through before you would feel comfortable leaving your child or niece or nephew or other loved one in their care. And all of those pieces are really important to make sure that those parents or those guardians and the people who are putting their trust in us do so in a way that is they can feel like they are what's the word? Their trust is well placed. And we want to make sure we're putting in place everything we can do to earn that trust and respect it once it's given, right? So as program managers and supervisors, we need to not only know that potential mentors will be good with young people, but also how cooperative they'll be with the guidelines set out by the program and your supervision. So you don't want anyone coming in who might be a great fit for working directly with the young people, but providing all of the support that you're going to be giving them, the coaching, the feedback. You don't want anyone turning around and just thinking they know better than you or aren't willing to listen or learn, right? We want to make sure that mentors are listening. And it's always helpful when we're ready to make those matches that we feel we know something about the mentor's interests and special skills or talents that might be able to share with their mentor. We've done some work on matching, and we'll make sure that there's some that's being recorded as well. But one of the big things to think about is, we think about the different elements of running a mentoring program. So that's recruitment, screening, training, matching, monitoring and support, and closure, as they all feed into each other. And so good screening is going to help us do good training, is going to help us do good matching, right? And we want to get to know the mentors as possible. So not just screening them for whether they be a good fit for the program, but starting to get to know them in a way that's going to allow you to make the best match possible. And so thinking about screening in terms of both that safety piece of it, that is really important, making sure we're not putting young people in harm's way with the adults in their lives, but also for suitability, that the adults that are putting in their lives are people who can have a reliable and consistent relationship, right? So not just that safety, but also the suitability. All right, again, I'm just gonna get all the bullets going. There we go. So the process of determining a potential volunteer's suitability for mentoring requires the use of several screening tools. When used efficiently, all of these tools can be vital in our assessment. So first, a thorough mentor screening should start when a candidate contacts you about volunteering. Most program managers will pre-screen people prior to sharing the written application. So, if you're doing just a quick phone call, if they're expressing interest, some sort of basic pre-screening of just, does this person, where are they coming from? What's their background? What made them come to us? Just really basic stuff before they even get the application. So this ensures that everyone that they screen and apply understands the screening process and are volunteering for the right reason. That's also really good for the volunteers because we want them to feel like they understand what the process is that they're getting into and the seriousness of the commitment. We don't want to give out an application packet or refer them to an online application if their idea about what mentoring isn't really in sync with what your program thinks that it is. And so it's a good idea to include the mentor job description along with details about the entire screening process with the application packet so that the volunteers fully understand what's going to be expected of them. We don't want to have any big surprises for the mentors as they come into the program and they're screened. Asking for written references that you can telephone or email, usually by phone, but written can work as well. After meeting them is standard practice. It can be someone from their personal life or professional life, depending on the nature of your program. You can see who might be the best that you want to hear from. A face-to-face interview is essential if we really want to get to know them. There's no better way to get to know another person than to be face-to-face with them and have that conversation. Even if you have to do it via phone or Zoom or whatever. But that like actual personal conversation is going to get you the most information more than a written application will. Another standard background practice for all programs is to conduct a criminal background check. And we're going to talk more about that in a little bit. The sex offender registry can provide information about anyone accused of crime against a child. That's a really basic tool that you can find for free online. And as well, understand that screening doesn't end at the very point where you accept them into the program, but you can keep an eye on the volunteers during their orientation or training and give us insight into how they interact with other people. Because just because they get through your background check process, your interview process, doesn't mean red flags won't pop up later. And you want to make sure you're keeping an eye open for that and staving off any issues before they become serious issues. So if you see red flags during training, even though they pass the interview and background check stage, you can take those seriously and use that as another place to do screening. And we'll talk later about how driving records might be a little useful as well, even if your program doesn't have them driving the mentees. All right. Let's go through here. So let's talk about the application. So what's the best way to use an application? So let's go back to the overall purpose of screening potential mentors. What are we trying to learn about individuals, and how can the written application help us? Besides the basic data such as name, address, and contact information, the questions chosen to be on an application should help to inform the interviewer in the same way a resume and cover letter work when you're looking for a job. So we want to know about an applicant's previous experience with mentoring, tutoring, as a camp counselor, or even if they babysat when they were in high school. Simply asking candidates if they have the time to volunteer won't give a complete picture of their availability. Asking applicants to describe their week or even a typical day, that'll give us a much better idea if mentoring is something that they have the time for, rather than simply asking them, hey, do you have the time for this? You should be the one to determine if this is something they can fit into their life, not the other way around, because we know that mentoring is a much larger time commitment than a lot of mentors think it is when they're coming into a program. So it's also a good idea to learn if applicants are affiliated with any other organization or do any type of volunteer work, not simply from a scheduling point of view, but to check for any possible conflicts of interest. You want to be aware of that, especially if you work in a larger nonprofit that your mentoring program is a part of. Are they volunteering, where else? Asking some simple questions about a candidate's family and upbringing on the written application, again, is going to help you drive a more detailed conversation during that face-to-face interview. So you want to ask questions on the application that are going to generate more questions in the interview. So getting that basic data that's going to allow you, once you sit down across from them, to ask those follow-up questions and really start getting a sense for who they are. It's always good to know if a potential volunteer has any special interests or skills, such as speaking another language or have expertise in art or sports. That's going to really help with that matching. Or if you have a program that's really focused on those types of activities, it's really good to know if they have background in those activities. It's not necessarily going to be a deal breaker or anything either way, but it's helpful to know. Of course, it's also important to know why someone wants to become a mentor, right? What's their motivation? A short essay question around that will help you understand their motivation as well as their expectations. It doesn't have to be pages, but just a paragraph, maybe two of why do you want to be a mentor and what are your expectations of it? Information like all of this is not just going to help you screen more thoughtfully, but it can also guide you in their future supervision conversation with the volunteer. We talked about matching, but also, this is going to be informing how you support and supervise them. So understanding what has inspired a mentor and their earliest life experiences are going to help you as a program manager later on when you are guiding them through any of the challenges that mentors face. All right, so third poll. So tell me about the family you grew up with. Are you the oldest, the middle child, youngest child, or are you an only child? Give people another minute or so to get on there. Give the last few folks a couple seconds to get in there and vote. All right, let's see. Pretty even mix. Pretty even mix. Not a ton of only children, a few youngest, but a good mix. All right, and we'll go to the next poll. If you could change one thing about your birth order, what would it be? So would you rather be the oldest, the youngest, have more siblings, or wish you'd been an only child? Give people another 10 seconds or so. All right, so let's see. Oh, a lot of people would have liked more siblings. That's interesting. Pull up my notes. So this is a good example of, an interesting way to get some information about folks through their childhood experiences, right? There's a lot of research around things like birth order and how that informs, who we are as adults and things like that. But another good thing is just to get people talking about their families, their relationships. What was their relationship like with their siblings? Did they not have any? Did they want more? Did they want less? Did they, and it starts as a conversation starter of talking about people and their families. And so I always think it's a really interesting question to pose to folks. Let's talk about conducting an interview. Let's get all the bullet points out. Go. So, good mentors don't need to be child development experts. They just have to be someone who likes spending time with young people. All mentors learn as they go, but being a good listener is a very important quality. Potential mentors should be, natural at demonstrating this type of good behavior and modeling. You want to make sure that they last for at least an hour. You want to have an in-depth conversation. You don't want it to be some, quick, drive-by, brief interview. And again, you want it to look at application questions, right? Looking at the application, you have those questions in there that are designed, hopefully designed, to provide, the foundation for more questions. So you want to root all of your interview questions in that. So again, potential mentors should be natural to demonstrating that type of good behavior. You want people who know how to model that's kind of those appropriate dynamics and communication skills with you, with other people who they might interact with, and they're having that interview. If they're coming and doing it in person, how do they interact with the people at the front desk? All sorts of things like that. When we're speaking with an applicant, we want to determine if the person is empathetic and able to show a positive regard for young people. So what's their philosophy regarding discipline? How do they feel about, young people managing behavior? What is their, what do they see as their role in engaging with that? Is this potential mentor someone who's willing to learn new skills, and can they take direction well from the program manager? It's very important that candidates for this type of volunteer work are open-minded, culturally sensitive, and do not judge others. Ask questions that give you insight into how they view current social issues, especially sensitive issues related to the populations you serve. So if you're serving LGBTQ youth, you can ask the specific questions about what are your views on LGBTQ youth. If you're working with immigrant refugee youth, you can ask them about how they feel about those specific things, especially around immigration policies, whatever. let's see, where was I? So good mentors, they're going to be genuine. They're going to want to be there and honest in their behavior. You want people who are authentic and real because that's what young people respond best to. Good mentors, you want to observe how they interact with you, their general demeanor, and a lot of that is a valid determinant of how they'll be with the mentee. How they are with you, how they bring themselves to that table is going to be how they bring themselves to also meet with their mentee. So we're looking for candidates who will make good thinking partners and show enthusiasm for the process of learning and growing. So from your gut, trust the impression you have of them. Especially if you've been doing this for a little while, you're going to really start getting a sense of, is this person a good fit or not? In the end, when an interview is complete and the applicant has answered all of your questions satisfactorily, but you still have an uncomfortable feeling of something you can't quite put your finger on, it's best to listen to your instinct. When we're working with youth, it's always better to make a mistake on the side of caution than on the side of generosity. Particularly, remember, when we're talking about volunteering, it's not the same as employment. No one has a legal right to be a volunteer. If it doesn't feel right to you, you can get a second opinion from a colleague or just simply pass on the candidate and you don't have to explain. You can just say, it wasn't a good fit. Most experienced volunteer interviewers agree it's best not to give an explanation why you're passing on them. Get all the bullets out. Cool. So, we talked about birth order, and the question always comes up, why do you need to know so much about my family? Why so many personal questions? And so when we talk about that, we really want to talk about risk management. For mentoring programs, screening volunteers is one of the most important pieces of risk management. As programs serving youth, we have a higher level of liability than other volunteer-based programs. So having a complete risk management plan is absolutely critical. Our board of directors expects that we will take every precaution where the minors in our care are concerned. Most importantly, we're accountable to the parents and guardians of our mentees. We have to be able to look them in the eye and tell them that they can trust the volunteer we have matched to their child. And we can only do this with honesty and integrity when we follow the universally accepted best practices in screening mentors, such as those in the Elements of Effective Practice and Mentoring that Mentor National puts out that informs a lot of our work. So the answer to the question about why we explore a candidate's family and childhood is because the more we know about an individual's experience as a child, the closer we will be to understanding how they will relate to a child. Traditionally, we would start by asking an application to tell us about the family they grew up in. Where are they in the birth order of siblings? What's it like being the middle child or the oldest child? The answer to each of these questions should generate a new question, right? It's like peeling an onion layer by layer until we kind of find the feelings attached to the experience. Everyone's early life has good and bad feelings associated with it. What we should be looking for are powerful negative memories that might have been traumatic. How are those feelings then dealt with, and how do you deal with that memory now as an adult? An adult child of an alcoholic might tell you they had counseling when they were in college and have attended Al-Anon meetings periodically, or they might say this is in the past and they try not to think about it. That second response should trouble you because it implies a lack of introspection and therefore the possibility of poor judgment should something with their mentee spark a flashback. Having that history of some type of trauma in their background is not a bad thing. Having that type of history in a way that has not been dealt with or doesn't seem to show you that it feels like it's being managed in some proactive way, that's a red flag. In fact, a lot of people who have those histories of whether that's childhood trauma or something in their own life are the ones who most want to be mentors because they had someone support them when they were younger and they want to pay it forward. And that's great. We want to encourage that. But we also want to encourage them to make sure that they have their own pasts, being managed in a way that's not going to impact their mentee. So, you don't want to confuse the process of assessment that we're talking about as judgmental. It's not the experience that we should care about, but rather how they have processed the experience and how they manage the feelings associated with the memories. If an interviewee is thoughtful and introspective, they will be better able to keep their feelings separated from the experience of their mentee, thereby avoiding over or underreacting. Understanding how someone deals with stressful situations is also really important. Mentoring can sometimes be stressful. It's good practice to explore how a potential mentor would handle that. Managing expectations. Ooh, there we go. So the interview is a good place to explore a candidate's ideas about mentoring. What do they think it'll be like? If they could pick the perfect mentee for you, who would that be and what would they look like? These questions can help you understand someone's preconceived ideas and correct any misconceptions about the role of a mentor. You want to make sure the potential mentor is not looking for a new best friend or thinks that they'll become a savior to some underprivileged child. This is not only like incorrect thinking, but left unchecked, it could lead to serious boundary crossing and harm to the mentee. An effective way to determine a volunteer's thought process is to pose scenarios based on real situations you may have experienced in the program. So you want them to be, really reflective of scenarios they might actually deal with. So think of one or two incidents involving mentors and mentees and ask the applicant how they might address this challenge. The object here is not to screen out anyone who doesn't have an easy solution, but rather to get a feeling for someone's problem-solving skills and how well they take supervision. For instance, when you tell them how the problem might be dealt with, are they taking your experience and ideas in, or are they resistant to any input? Mentors are not only people who can do well with children, they need to be someone who can get along with you and your program team, and you want people that you can trust to follow guidelines as well as your advice. Let's talk about references. Great. So once you've met with a potential mentor, you might have some doubts or unanswered questions. Speaking with one or two of the references they provide might be a good way to round out your opinion. A good way to start is to verify some of the basic information provided in the written reference, such as, how do you know the volunteer? What is the nature of your relationship? Once you have established trust with them, consider asking a question that provides you with a more accurate picture of the volunteer's personality or character. You want to stay away from questions that generate a simple yes or no answer. Instead, form a question that requires qualification or could provide a story or explanation. So for example, you could say, tell me about one of the times when Michael lost his temper at work, right? That's an open-ended question. And lastly, I've never known anyone to lie about something safety related regarding their own children. So asking something just point blank like, would you leave your child in this volunteer's care for an afternoon away from the house? Really just that's going to really cut to it. Is this someone you would trust with your child? And that's a really great way to just kind of cut through a lot of the dancing and get a straight answer. All right, on to background checks. Okay. So, as you're probably all aware, one of the most critical pieces of a mentor screening is the criminal background check. The value of a fingerprint background check is that no one has your fingerprints but you. Where it's possible for people to maintain multiple social security numbers, though it might be illegal, they can still do it. And people only have one set of fingerprints. So the traditional ink rolled, print rolling, I don't know if you guys ever had to do that. I feel like I've been fingerprinted so many times from all the different jobs I've had. Is what most of us are familiar with, but it's a much more modern system now available in most areas. I don't know if you've been to it yet, but they put your hand in like one of those little, it's like a scanner and roll it back and forth. So live active fingerprints are the best way to do this. So there's several advantages of the live active print. Inked prints were only good for a background check. If you wanted updated information, you'd have to reprint every 2 years or so to find out what happened there. So, if I did the print check 2 years ago, and then a year ago, I got into some trouble with the law, you're not going to find out about that right away. So with a live active check, once your prints are entered into the system, if there's any change in the volunteer's criminal status, you'll be notified immediately. Secondly, this process is much simpler initially. It only requires placing your hands on a screen. Your images get shared with every computer record in the nation, and results usually come back within a week. So this is typically run through the FBI, thus the picture of the guy in the FBI jacket. There is a cost associated with this process, and that cost does vary in different areas. In New York City, it's a little bit simpler because if you are a program in New York City, they have a program called GoPass. So GoPass allows legitimate mentoring programs to access the criminal background check process used by the Department of Education for only $60 each. An added benefit to the GoPass is that a volunteer can take their status with them to another program that's in the system without being reprinted. So, if I'm volunteering at Big Brothers Big Sisters and then I want to go volunteer at the Boys and Girls Club down the street, I don't have to get a second fingerprint background check. I can just take mine with them through the city, and it's really nice. Not all programs are geographically designed to accommodate in-person background checks. And right now, I don't know that in-person background checks are really happening due to the current pandemic. However, I do want to include a few other online services that provide background checks without fingerprints. The first is Verified Volunteers. They actually just changed their name. Let me see if I can figure out. I forgot to update this when I was getting ready this morning. Sterling Volunteers is the new name, but I'll provide the link for that in the follow-up email. So this is a resource that can be found online. It's a price range depending on the amount of product you use. So a basic criminal background check is a certain price. You can add on credit checks or other checks if you pay additional fees. And most of these there are Social Security number based. LexisNexis is also another online organization with a running scale of screening services. So you can take as much or as little as you believe you need for your assurance of a volunteer's viability. I know some programs have been using these in the interim right now while they can't do the live background checks. I'm not sure, honestly, if they are open or not right now. It probably depends a bit on where in the state you are, but you'd have to double check that. Yeah. When it comes to a lot of this, I'll say two more things before I move on. First is, what's really important with background checks is that you have a consistent policy and process. The live active fingerprint background checks are definitely the absolute best way. But what's really important is that you're consistent with the way that you do it and that you're not making exceptions for some people and some that are not. If harm comes to a child in your program, you want to be able to say, I did everything in my power and I fulfilled our standard protocol. And so, we did what we were supposed to do and we still couldn't prevent it. If you're just, making exceptions for someone's cousin who's coming into the program, or you don't follow up with this person, all of those things can come back to bite you because you're not being consistent with your policies and your process. The second thing is, with background checks, and I think this is always kind of comes up and is important, when someone comes back with a criminal background and some sort of record, that it's not an automatic disqualifier of them being able to be a mentor in your program. You have to really look and see what is the nature of, their, if they have any kind of arrests, or, what is it? What is your program? What sort of risk are you willing to take on? If someone has a nonviolent drug offense from 20 years ago and is open about being in recovery for the last 15 years, that's not necessarily someone that you don't want in your program. If someone has an assault charge from 4 years ago, that's probably not someone you want in your program. So you want to make sure that you are, thinking about that as well. That just because someone comes back with, again, like a DUI 20 years ago, that doesn't necessarily mean that that's someone that you don't want as part of your program. You can ask a follow-up question. You can find out about it a bit more. There's lots of other things you can do. But it's just important to mention that because I don't think, for a lot of programs, someone who has some sort of criminal record might be someone who's a perfect volunteer because they can speak from a lot of their life experience around their involvement with the criminal justice system. All right. Let's talk about training as a screening tool. Let's just get all the bullets out. So, screening volunteers does not end once they've been scheduled for training. The training room is an excellent place for program managers to observe volunteers engaging with the subject of mentoring and interacting with each other. Are they listening attentively? Do they ask appropriate questions in relation to the topic being discussed? Are they respectful of other participants as well as the presenters? These are all really important indicators of how participants will act once they have been matched to a mentee and should be considered carefully. You really want to make sure you're noticing how do they interact with other people, how are they building relationships with other people, and how are they treating the people around them with respect or not. So a lot of programs right now are doing virtual mentoring. So we want to talk about some things that are specific to that. Using a private video chat platform, we have some resources on selecting software that we can send you separately if you reach out afterwards. Making sure the mentor has privacy. So as you're screening them, make sure that, if you're video chatting with them, take a look and see what's around them. Do they have a private place they can exist in while they're doing their mentoring? Reviewing the ethical principles of the program, you want to make sure that they understand that there, are maybe certain specific boundaries, certain specific things they want to be aware of. Observe their dress and their space. Are they, appropriate and professional in the way they bring themselves electronically, even though it's not in person? And as well as confidentiality and disclosure. You want to have conversations with them around, what does that look like for a virtual program? You want to make sure that if I'm sitting here talking to my mentee, that there's not like my whole family out there hearing everything we're talking about, right? That's really important. So let's talk about a few additional tools that didn't really come up, and these are things that may or may not be of use to you. So in addition to the screening tools we just discussed, many programs use secondary tools to further determine a prospective mentor's appropriateness. One of the more important tools available to us is the National Sex Offender Registry. Some programs utilize home visits as another way to determine the fitness of a volunteer, particularly if that program is going to be allowing the mentee into the mentor's home. Then a home visit can be really important. Additionally, more and more information is available online and is advised that screeners Google candidates to see how they're represented on various online profiles. Let me see. I feel like there's a whole slide with the DMV. So yeah, let's get to that. I don't want to jump too far ahead. So using the sex offender registry. In the last few years, the federal government has unified the sex offender registry. So before you'd have to go state by state, you can go into one national registry. It's still a bit of a tedious process, but now it's less time consuming than it was. So you log into the website, you can use the search by name option, and then use as complete a name as possible. If a record exists, a picture and some information about that crime will appear. Let's talk about DMV. Why should we care about a potential mentor's driving record? Oh, this was supposed to be a poll, but let's see. So you don't have to type it into the question box, or I didn't make it into a poll or anything, but think about it. Which of these statements do you think are good reasons for doing a DMV check for potential mentors? Should any of these concern a mentoring program manager? So the answer is that all three of these statements are good reasons to doubt a candidate's viability for being a mentor. Many of us have one or two speeding tickets. Sometimes they're unavoidable. I used to work at a summer camp in a bit more of a rural area of New Jersey outside Philadelphia. And there's a part where you're coming into this town where the speed limit drops from 55 to 25, and there's 2 stop signs in a row. And I got a speeding ticket there for coming from the 55. I got a ticket for going 30 in the 25 and not coming to a complete stop at the first of 2 stop signs. I'm still frustrated about that. It was actually a little extra funny because it was on visiting day for the camp, and so all these kids, their parents were coming in from Philly and down from New York City and from Camden and Newark to visit. And I'm like, they're pulled over by a cop, and all the kids, their parents are just driving by. It was very embarrassing, but it was funny. They all just made fun of me later. But sometimes they're unavoidable. You have very overactive traffic police. So you should be concerned with the person who has multiple tickets. So these are often people who don't follow rules, right? That if you get that 1 or 2, especially if they're in the same area, like that happens. But if someone has 5, 6, 10 tickets over the past few years, that could be a red flag. People who make up their own rules are often called mavericks. So being a maverick in business might be a good thing, but a maverick on the road is a danger to public safety, and a maverick in your mentoring program is a supervision nightmare waiting to happen, right? This is the first person that decides that rule applies to the other mentors, not to me. I can take my mentee back to my apartment. It's okay, right? I I don't care if a PhD child psychologist has volunteered to mentor in your program. If you determine that they're not someone you can effectively supervise, you want to let them go. Some people are just not followers, and I'll tell these people that they have lots of great ideas, and maybe you should go start your own mentoring program. So that is screening. Does anyone have any specific questions? I'll open up the question box and let's see. I'm also going to put our contact information on here if you want to write it down. That's our phone number, although no one's at the office right now, so I wouldn't recommend calling it, but that is my email and it is a great way to get a hold of any specific questions. I'll give people a minute or two to type in any questions they have. So here's a good question. Do we provide training for mentors? We do some. We can also work with programs to develop your own trainings. Typically, programs will pay for us to come in if we're just delivering a training, and there's a cost associated with that I can, if you reach out, we can let you know. There you go. Oh, here's a great question. 50% of our new volunteers come from current volunteers / word of mouth. Sometimes, unless there is a blatant red flag, it can be hard to reject a candidate, especially when we struggle with recruitment. Any tips to help us feel more comfortable rejecting candidates who might not be that bad, but aren't particularly strong? That's tricky, and you have to kind of feel that out for your own program's needs, right? You don't want to, if a candidate might be decent, but with some providing some support coaching could get there, that might be a way to think about it. What I would evaluate in that case isn't so much your screening and rejection protocols, so much as thinking about your recruitment and your training and supervision protocols. Because if someone who comes in who doesn't have any real red flags, but seems like they might be okay, what extra training and support can you provide them to get them where you want? And then you also want to make sure on the front end for your recruitment, you want to make sure that as you're recruiting and talking to them, so especially if you're using current volunteers for recruitment, which is an excellent way to do recruitment, you want to make sure you're talking to them about what your expectations are, what you're looking for, and be really specific about who may or may not be as successful. And I think up front, you can tell your current volunteers that, just because you are referring someone doesn't necessarily mean they're going to make it through. We do want to be really, really choosy and particular about who we take. And so I think front loading it like that and setting the expectation that there's a good chance that it just might not happen, I think it helps soften that blow. But again, I would use that as an opportunity to think more about what kind of training and support are we giving them that could help take them from a meh candidate to a good one. Because not everyone's going to come in as a superstar. A lot of people are going to come in and feel a little meh, but without any red flags, just we're not really sure. So what can we do to support them to get them doing good? Awesome. This is a great question too. So these ideas seem very suited for adult mentors. Do you think that any of these screening tools would be necessary to use for students acting as peer mentors? Particularly with peer mentoring programs, they typically happen in a school. And I just know based on having talked to you that you run a school-based peer mentoring program. And so a lot of the stuff around screening with the safety is not really relevant in the same way. I think you really want to focus in on the screening for suitability. Particularly with peer mentoring programs, the thing you run into a lot are boundary issues. And so the more you can screen your peer mentors for strength in managing boundaries, communication skills, what's the word? Like self-awareness, things like that are going to be really important. So obviously you're not going to be doing necessarily background checks, but I would still absolutely do a lot of the application and interview process, even having references in terms of other teachers at the school, for example. A lot of that stuff is still really, really, really useful for peer mentoring programs. I wouldn't worry so much about the background checks, unless you really want to look into their, disciplinary records at the school or things like that. That might be of use. But really focusing in on how are we screening for suitability is still going to be really, really important. It's just going to change maybe what's shifting, shift what you're asking, right? You want to make sure, like, why are you interested in this program? Why are you interested in being a mentor? And really being aware for issues of boundaries being incurred, right? Because they're just closer in age and they're just naturally going to get blurred. And that's okay as long as you're kind of expecting it. So working at fingerprinting done in New York City. So again, if you're in New York City specifically, you want to look into the GoPass program. Definitely see if you can, be eligible and use that. I don't know exactly all the eligibility requirements. You have to look, but you can call them and they'll be able to give you more information. Again, it's through the New York City government. It's through, I believe it's through DOE. I'm pretty sure. But I think it's a really good program. I'd love to see it replicate in other parts of the state. It gets a little bit trickier in other parts of the state, but if you reach out afterwards, we can help you get connected. It looks like those are the questions. If anything else does come up afterwards that you wish you'd asked or you forgot about, feel free to shoot us an email. My email address is right there. And like I said, by the end of the week, we'll definitely reach out with some resources and recording and the slides and all of that from today's webinar. I hope you'll join us next week for our webinar at the same time. Let me just look quickly, see which one it is. Let's take a gander. So next week, we'll be talking mentoring boys and young men of color. I think that's going to be a really fruitful, hopefully an interesting conversation. If you have any thoughts or questions about that, feel free to let me know. Hope you can all make it, and as well as we'll make sure to send all of the recordings of our past webinars as well. Otherwise, I hope you have a great rest of your week and weekend, and we'll see you again next time. Thank you.